Welcome to the Migration Summit Week 3. My name is Dimitri Fidel. I'm one of the co-chairs. I work with Fromm Foundation and MIT. The Migration Summit 2022 is organized by the MIT Refugee Action Hub, Namal, Karam Foundation, Paper Airplanes, and the MIT Abdul Latif Jamil World Education Lab, JWEL. It's a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, nonprofits, and NGOs, social enterprises, foundations, philanthropists, researchers, policymakers around the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme of education and workforce development in displacement through virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world. Welcome again and welcome to our panel. It's going to be a great session. I'm really looking forward to it. Today's panel will examine how communities of displaced communities and refugees can be included and gain access to meaningful and well-paying work opportunities in the digital economy as online freelancers by leveraging their skills as digital entrepreneurs. As the global gig economy has gained traction in COVID times, and remote work opportunities are increasingly common and unquestioned, how can this development serve displaced people, and how can different stakeholders support them in taking advantage of remote work opportunities? How can legal and financial barriers be overcome to make sure that everyone that wants to can be a freelancer? These are key questions and central, I think, to many of the themes we've tackled during the summit. I am very happy to introduce a frequent collaborator from Kiron, a close organization. Many of us have worked with them. Lily, I'll pass the panel and the session over to you now. Thank you for introducing it.
Thank you so much, Dimitri, and thank you to all of you for joining our session today. We're really excited to be here, not just myself, but also my co-speakers for this session today that will be introducing themselves shortly. First of all, I do want to give credit also to Dimitri for brainstorming with me on something that might be interesting to talk about during this Migration Summit, because it is something that we as an organization at Kiron, where I work, but many of us, maybe also many of you, have really kind of tried to understand and address throughout, especially the last 2 years marked by COVID. And given the fact that many of us have had to continue working online, which have, that has been beset with challenges, but also opportunities that we think many in the world have come to leverage. And we really wanted to understand exactly how refugees can leverage these kinds of online and digital work opportunities, and to understand how, really, as Dimitri pointed out, inclusive these definitions of digital nomads and the gig economy really are to refugees worldwide. So I'd like to just start by sharing my screen and essentially lead us through our agenda. As my screen is loading, I would like to highlight that we'll start with just an introduction on kind of who's in the room in terms of us as speakers, but also we'll hopefully have a bit of a question for you in terms of who you represent or where you work. Then we'll discuss some challenges that we, as in our work and as practitioners, have come to recognize when it comes to refugees accessing freelance work opportunities in the global gig economy. Then we'll go into a discussion of the industry trends that we've recognized in this domain. So really, how employers and tech companies especially as well are pivoting, and what kind of skills they're looking for example. Then we'll actually be turning to you for input. So we'll be breaking out into breakout rooms, and each of us kind of session hosts will lead a breakout room where we're asking you to brainstorm with us on what solutions you envision when it comes to making the freelance gig economy and digital work opportunities more inclusive to refugees. And then, of course, we'll be coming back to the plenary to present our solutions to each other and have a bit of a Q&A depending on what questions come up in the chat, and close hopefully with potential ideas for collaboration and next steps between all of us here in the session today. So thank you again for joining us. And now I would like to start by, just as I'm still talking, briefly introduce who I am and where I work, and then would hand over to my co-speakers, Enrique and Hugh. So I have been working for Kiron since 2017. We are an edtech nonprofit organization originally founded in Berlin, Germany, that has country offices in Jordan and Lebanon that were opened in 2017. We've developed an online learning platform specifically for refugees worldwide to be able to access free online learning opportunities, self-paced learning, but also blended learning that we facilitate, especially through our country offices. And in response to the pandemic, we've really decided to open up our platform and essentially facilitate online and blended learning delivery for other nonprofit organizations that were previously delivering and offering offline learning opportunities to refugees, and supporting them in digitalizing those offers and making them available on our learning platform, the Kiron Campus. I would like to highlight that we as Kiron have always made it our mission to make sure that we provide our students with the most high quality courses, materials, and content that we curate from external course providers, but also create ourselves and also in collaboration with our partners. And a lot of what we've learned throughout the last few months has been, the interest among our students in kind of freelance work, online work opportunities, and really leveraging the gig economy for work opportunities. And so this is what brought us together with DignifAI, and also with Naya, represented here by Enrique and Hugh. And so I'd like to just let them introduce themselves. Enrique, would you like to go first?
Certainly. Thank you, Lily, for the introduction. Thank you to the whole Migration Summit team for the invitation and coordination. And hello to everybody who's in the room. So DignifAI is my name is Enrique Jose Garcia. I am managing partner of DignifAI. We are a for-profit social startup that began operations in 2020. We have on-site projects in Colombia and Brazil, but we also have teams of freelancers in the region of Latin America, including Venezuela, Peru, Panama, Chile, and a couple of other countries. Our primary focus in DignifAI is to generate new income opportunities through what's called data annotation for machine learning companies. And through this, what we want to do is promote the economic and productive integration of those communities that have been affected by the Venezuelan migration crisis, which has already seen over 6 million people leave Venezuela, the grand majority of them going down into other countries of South America. We work a lot with machine learning companies, but we also work a lot with companies that are in different spaces, such as the health space, academic space, the humanitarian space, e-commerce, et cetera, et cetera. Because of where we work at, which is primarily in the two border regions between Venezuela and Colombia, and Venezuela and Brazil, we have also received the support of many international cooperation companies, such as Internet Society Foundation, which we're working on together with Kiron, also World Food Program Germany, and also Ashoka. And what we do is that while we have our projects of data annotation, whether it's on-site or remote, we also give our annotator teams additional content for them to further their upskilling skills and develop new skills around productivity and digital work and digital income generation. Our theory of change is that micro work in the data annotation space can really function as a springboard, and that economic and labor integration is the strategy, the long-term strategy that can have the most sustainable and long-term sustainability in these migratory contexts. And then to finalize, in our 16 months operating, we have developed a freelance community of 160 people. 80% of them are women. Most of them are between the ages of 18 and 29. But we're slowly growing, and it's a fascinating community, the Venezuelan migrant, but also the host community. There's a lot of skills that have left the Venezuelan country, people who have academic and professional credentials and certificates that have been stuck in informal markets or unemployed or underemployed. And this is exactly the type of skill set that a lot of these machine learning companies need to train those machine learning models. So what we're doing is essentially matching that supply and demand for this training element. So having said that, very happy and honored to be here and looking forward also to learning from all of you in the sessions, and I'll pass it over to Hugh.
Thanks, Enrique. Great to meet everyone. My name's Hugh. I'm one of the founders at Naya. Naya is a UK-based talent platform for inclusion. We operate globally, but we launched in the UK about 18 months ago. And we match critical resource gaps in the tech industry with diverse and historically underserved or excluded talent. So we started out working specifically with refugees. We've grown that naturally into a more kind of holistic approach to inclusion, but refugees remains our the largest kind of community of people of talent that we have on our platform. And we've been connected with Kiron, with Lily and the team there through looking to provide education and training opportunities for people who are looking to transition into the tech industry or into freelance or remote working opportunities, and been great to meet Enrique in the last few days as we've been prepping for this and excited for what's to come.
Thank you so much, Enrique. Hugh and Enrique. Hugh is joined by Banu, who also represents Naya. Would you like to say a few words as well, Banu?
Thank you so much, Lily, and thank you so much for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be among all of you. My name is Banu. I represent Naya, and I am partnerships and community engagement lead. Looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Lana, were we able to set up the poll? Because we thought it might be nice to hear who's in the room and who's joined us today, and have essentially opened a poll to let you tell us what kind of an organization you work for or represent. So we have here the options of nonprofit organization, for-profit company, university, education institution, public institutions, or that maybe you are a freelancer yourself or a student joining today. Okay. Seeing the answers coming in. Almost 60% have voted.
It's quite even between all the answers.
Yes, except that we are not seeing anybody represent a public institution, like let's say a Ministry of Education or Labor, or anyone from that kind of an organization. But more than 70% of you have voted, so thank you so much. I think the rest of those answers are probably us who didn't vote. But thank you very much, and it's really wonderful to have so many student and learners amongst us, and also fellow nonprofit representatives, but also for-profit companies, as well as university institutions, 3 of which are represented here. So yeah, that's really wonderful. Thank you so much for showing us those results, Lana. And I think now it will be time for me. I think I can close the screen. Thank you, to head into the next part of our conversation. So this is really where we just wanted to take a minute to look at the actual definitions of the terms that get thrown around so much, especially in COVID times, that kind of inspired us to look at, you know, how inclusive is freelance work, specifically the definition of, sorry, my cat likes to join meetings. The definition of a digital nomad being a person who earns a living working online in various locations of their choosing, an Oxford Dictionary definition that I found, which basically just shows that it really could be anyone. There's no definition about any socioeconomic background or geography, or also, you know, nationality of where this person comes from. So it really could be anyone. But I feel like we all have a sense for the fact that digital nomads are often considered to be well-educated, highly skilled people who have a lot of work experience, that also have the financial ability to move wherever they want to live, and then work from anywhere in the world. But I think this definition reminds us that that we shouldn't see digital nomads to be just that one specific kind of maybe stereotype that we have, that comes to mind when you think of that term. And secondly, the gig economy being an economic activity that involves the use of temporary or freelance workers to perform jobs. Essentially also very open, very much showing that it could be anything here. It could be in the tech field, but it could also be in hospitality or anything where people are contributing to an activity on a temporary basis. So here again, we see that this term has maybe been a little bit kind of framed a lot in the tech field, but could also be seen more openly in that the definition actually defines that it is any economic activity, just as long as it revolves around temporary or freelance work. Now the question really is, you know, what are challenges that people might be facing across the world in accessing freelance work opportunities? Both being a digital nomad and working in the gig economy really present great opportunities and flexibility to people, but also come with quite some challenges to access, and also some pitfalls. So we'd like to talk about those specifically with Enrique, who will help us just kind of highlight the challenges that he would most kind of importantly kind of want to share with us. Sorry, I keep clicking my screen. So what are these key challenges for refugees specifically in the digital freelancer space? Enrique, I'll hand over to you.
Super, Lily, thank you. And I'll try to address this question, obviously from the lenses of our experiences here in LATAM, but the idea is later we discuss them all in these rooms to also get different perspectives from different regions and contexts. I'm going to give three basic challenges. The first one I think is quite expected, and one that is shared from different contexts. And then the second and the third one are actually quite unique, I think, and hopefully it fosters a little bit of interesting conversation and debate later in the rooms. So the first challenge I want to highlight is the obvious one of the legal and financial integration challenges of refugees or migrant communities in different contexts. And from the experience that we've had here, specifically in Colombia, Colombia is the second country in the world with the most either IDP or migrant communities in the world after Syria, and not mentioning not counting yet the tragedy in Europe now. But Colombia is a country that in a span of 5 to 6 years received 2 million Venezuelan refugees. And this is a country that in itself has always had its own economic challenges. It's a country that has a per capita GDP of $5,000. So it's very different to compare Colombia as a host country of these refugees to, for example, a European country where per capita GDPs are $25,000, $30,000 and up. So at the beginning of this humanitarian emergency, a lot of the focus of NGOs, public sector, was to address the emergency, the humanitarian emergency. But over time, that focus has had to transition into, okay, we have 2 million new citizens here, new people. How do we integrate them? They're not going to return to Venezuela. And the primary tool to integrate them is we have to give them opportunities for them to generate for themselves and for their families. And that's really where the opportunity of the gig economy comes, because when we talk about the scaling of income generating opportunities, data annotation is a type of task that offers a lot of volume and a lot of repetitiveness. But in order for these refugees and migrants to be able to work, they have to have permission essentially to work in their new countries. And there's the legal aspect of that. So in Colombia, for example, we between 2015 and 2019, we had nearly 2 million refugees come in, but only 40% of them came in legally. 60% of them, which is 900,000 people approximately, were illegally in the country and therefore could not access employment opportunities, could not access financial or banking services, etc. So even if they wanted to work, even if they wanted to apply the skills, they didn't have the opportunity to do so because of regulatory limitations. So the first task, and it was something that was actually quite historical in a regional basis. It took a little while to do it, but they did it. The Colombian government passed what's called the ETP, which is Estatuto Temporal de Protección, or Temporary Statute of Protection, which automatically transferred all illegal migrants into legal migrants. And that way it would open up the doors to be able to access banking services, health services, etc. Or at least that was the idea in theory. The problem or the challenge here was that while the government gave this special permission, the banking industry, for example, did not follow up on an agile basis. So the banking industry still had to wait and still had to do the internal coordination so that this new migrant base and refugee base could access their banking services, whether it be a problem with the documentation, whether it be a problem with the permissions, etc. So the main challenge that I'm trying to present here is that while it is important for the public sector to be able to, open the doors for refugees and migrants to have access to the local economy, they have to coordinate very closely with local industries. And that's something that in Colombia, for example, we have seen has had a lag of time, and that has closed or has limited a lot the integration efforts for these refugees. The second also, and kind of are tied to this very first challenge, is Fintech regulation. So by definition, gig economy or digital nomads required to be productive and generate income over activities in the internet. And by definition, this means that they also have to be paid through the internet. If the local banking system does not permit fintech companies to emerge, or does not permit the very same banking institutions to also develop and innovate new products and services to allow these refugees, migrants, and local populations to be paid through digital means, then we go back to the same problem. The opportunity is there, the door is open, but they cannot go through the door because they cannot get paid. In Colombia, we have seen this, where there's a lot of antiquated laws that were designed 20, 30 years ago to prevent money laundering, that prevents or slows down a lot of the innovation in the fintech space. And this has not been able to change in the past 5 years or 6 years, which is when the migration crisis has accelerated. Even if there are some experiments that banks are doing, some slight innovations, usually it comes with high commissions, or usually it comes with a very long lag of time between getting paid and receiving money in your account. And when we're talking with refugees, they really depend on these flows of income on a daily or weekly basis. So they cannot afford to be paid 30, 45 days later. So it's the same as nothing. And in many times it acts as a disincentive to work in the online economy. So that's the first challenge. And then the second challenge that I want to focus on is, or the third challenge I want to focus on, is ethics and transparency. And what I mean by this in the gig economy context, and especially the data annotation work, is that, again, it is so ideal for these sorts of contexts because of the volume and the repetitive nature of the work, which is why tech companies usually outsource this to organizations like ours. But it also creates a couple of problems. The first is that there are many levels between clients and annotators, or clients and the people actually doing the work. You can have the actual companies that's developing the machine learning software, and then they can subcontract an agency, who subcontracts an agency, who subcontracts an agency. And by having several levels, when there's downward pressure in pricing and margin, we really don't know who is accountable for that. So this permits or opens the door sometimes for the primary client to really trickle down that pressure and pricing, so that the person who's actually doing the annotator has very low margins and sometimes below legal levels of margins. So the ethics around this space is something that has to continue to be debated. The term digital sweatshop has often started being used in this sort of context. We know of many companies, for example, here in Venezuela, who are paying people 40 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour. And because in Venezuela, given the inflation in recent years and the lack of institutional oversight, it's very subjective as to, you know, how do they control, if they can control the amount of compensation that they're receiving on an hourly basis. And the other point that supports this challenge is that it's a space that usually has very low barriers to entry. And because of this, the bargaining power that clients and companies have can be very strong. And therefore they can tell digital nomads and freelance communities, we're going to pay you this. And if you don't accept, there's thousands of other people that will accept. And that is a way that they can to pressure the downward, the downward pressure on the pricing, which sometimes can lead to unethical compensation. So I think these are the two challenges that I want to focus on primarily. The first one, again, a little bit more traditional. The second one, a little bit more different, and hopefully promotes a little bit of debate. So I'll leave it there. And Lily, Hugh, would love to hear also your thoughts.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Enrique, for shedding light on what you've been witnessing, especially in the Colombia, Venezuela context. Yeah, I am curious just about how much regulation you have seen kind of coming up in this space in Colombia specifically. For example, we heard about this in a session yesterday hosted by Education for Employment, that, for example, in a country like Jordan, where I'm also currently based, there's really tight restrictions on the kind of sectors in which refugees can work. However, this digital kind of freelancing space is largely unregulated. And I do wonder if that's an opportunity or even more of a pitfall, kind of, especially given the kind of ethical concerns that you raised at the beginning there. This is maybe something we can answer together also as we kind of segue into the trends that Hugh want to highlight for us, just looking at the time. But it's something that's definitely very interesting to hear about every context that we know about here. Thank you so much, Enrique, and I would pass over to you, Hugh, to speak to us a little bit about the trends that you're seeing. Sure. In the tech industry, especially.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Lily. And I'll share a little bit about our story with Naya and pick out some of the trends that we've seen. Some of that will be based off of some empirical research. A lot of it will be just based purely off of observation. So, and I'm sure there are people on the call who've been in this space a lot longer than I have, who could probably add some more color to it. So I would invite participants to just share their thoughts in the chat as I go, and I might see if I can pick out on certain things. But yeah, so we started Naya in early 2021 with kind of two key trends, I guess, that we that formed the foundation for why we started Naya. One was the skills gap in the tech industry, which was proliferating. I mean, it's I don't think there's been an industrial revolution before where the skills changes are proliferating rather than it being like a linear change. Like one day it was this, the next day it was that. It's just compounding every single year. There's new technology, new skills, and that's created a huge problem for tech companies to find the right resources to hit their targets and execute on their projects. The other trend that we'd seen was this issue of displacement, and that 1 billion people were due to be displaced around the world by 2050, and that was the kind of big stat that we saw. And when I was chatting about it with my co-founder before we started the company, we were looking at that and saying that there needs to be a narrative shift around the way we see refugees as a problem, because when we look in the industry, we're like, there is a serious dearth of skill and talent, and then when you look in the refugee community, there is huge volumes of untapped, underutilized resource and skill and qualifications. And so we wanted to look at this with a kind of commercial mindset and say, actually, can we look at the refugee crisis as an opportunity for businesses with the resource gaps? And we were doing that at a time, this was only just over 12 months ago. We were doing this at a time where the pandemic had started to change working trends around the world, and this idea of remote work being something we could actually start to use more frequently. I mean, even before the pandemic, and Enrique mentioned this, a lot of tech companies already were outsourcing a lot of their tech capabilities to different parts of the world. They use the term offshoring. I don't like that phrase, but essentially finding other regions where there's a high degree of talent to outsource a lot of the tech development. So these kind of trends for us, we call it a perfect storm at NIA. We felt there was a perfect storm coming together for us to actually look at this this whole area differently and change the narrative around it. And that's kind of where we started. After just a few months of getting started, we started to connect with loads of amazing NGOs and training programs and communities that were doing awesome work in this space, often at quite a local level. So whether it was in London in the UK, or just in the UK generally, or in Lebanon or in Kenya, and we felt that with the growth of remote work, that if there was a way of pooling all of those resources together, then that would create a much stronger buying power that would give refugees better access to opportunities. Because ultimately what we learned quite early on was, it's not necessarily skills or qualifications that is a barrier for refugees, although perhaps validating them across borders is a challenge. But the real challenge is getting access and relevant experience in the job markets that refugees are looking to work in or have been displaced into. And so we launched just a couple of months ago now. We launched a talent inclusion platform, essentially a marketplace, where people can create their profiles. They list their skills, their preferences for remote work, and then we have employers post their jobs and the skills required and the preferences for those different roles that they're posting, and then we just do a simple matching of people to opportunity. And we've only launched that a couple of months ago, and one of the biggest trend that we've seen is just the response from the business community has been massive. And obviously the timing of it, with everything happening in Europe off the back of the war in Ukraine, the timing of it, that there does seem on this occasion to be a real buy-in from the business community across Europe, that people are recognizing that there is actually there is benefit by investing in refugees and seeing them as talented individuals who can contribute to an economy, which is obviously one of the positives that's come out of such an awful thing that's happened. So those are kind of some of the key trends. I think when we look at freelancing in particular, I wanted to touch on that. I think that, and Enrique touched on this as well, that micro work is a great springboard. Freelancing is a great springboard to move into more permanent, more secure roles with some sort of tenure in different companies. So it's a great opportunity for refugees to springboard. Now we know with micro work there's been a lack of transparency, there's been manipulation, and so we're hoping that through the use of kind of platforms, that kind of thing can be mitigated, and actually freelancing can be a genuine, ethical and transparent opportunity for people globally to get access to remote opportunities, especially in the tech industry. yeah, so I think freelancing, I think it's something like 80% of managers are expecting to increase their use of freelancers. When it comes to working with refugees from an industry perspective, it removes a bit of the perceived risk in hiring refugees. I think a lot of employers that we've come across, there's a perceived risk that once they start actually hiring refugees, or even just hiring remote contractors from other parts of the world, they realize that a lot of that risk is just perceived, it's not real. But the freelancing approach gives them that kind of flexibility to bridge the gap in the meantime before they perhaps take people on full time. But I guess freelancing also gives individuals a lot of flexibility, and actually it's becoming increasingly a preference for people to see themselves as entrepreneurs and use their skills as a freelancer to get access to different kinds of projects and different kind of work. So I think freelancing is probably here to stay and is going to increase quite heavily. I think there's mutual interest from both an employer and an employee, and I think that creates a great opportunity to change the narrative around displaced talent in particular. So those are kind of some of the key trends that I wanted to pull out on. I think the other one, I guess, that I didn't touch on is the diversity and inclusion piece. I think the market for diversity and inclusion is expected to double in the next 2 years. So it's something around 7 billion at the moment, and I think it's expected to hit $15 billion by 2025. So that adds another element to this, that by giving access to refugees, people are actually hiring diverse minds, people that think differently, people who have demonstrated resilience throughout their life, that come from different cultures, that can help businesses grow. And I think the benefits of investing in that type of talent now is very well documented, that return on investment is very clear. So that's another trend that I think presents opportunities that we've not seen before in this space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hugh. That was also really insightful. You've touched on a lot of important points that I think will inspire the conversation in the breakout rooms. Looking at the time, I think we might have to head into those so that we have a good 20 minutes for everybody to discuss, and for you all to share ideas and thoughts, and also ask more questions. I haven't had a look at the chat yet, if there are any burning questions waiting to be answered in the chat itself. I think I have to quickly leave.
Lily, I don't see anything in the chat yet, so we can probably move on to the breakout.
Okay, great. Well, then let's do that. Thanks so much, Dimitri. And essentially, what we are asking of you is, in your breakout rooms, share and discuss any ideas for how refugees could be better included in the digital economy. So in freelance work, in the gig economy, how can they become digital nomads, in the sense that we learned about at the beginning of the session, and also make sure that not only they are benefiting from the springboard, especially that these opportunities can be, as Hugh highlighted, but are also really contributing high value and talent that is needed, apparently, by businesses around the world. So whose responsibility is it? What kind of decisions need to be made at what level, and what can we all, representing the different organizations or ourselves here, do to kind of bring this forward and make sure that these kinds of work opportunities are as inclusive as possible. I think we are about 40 participants, not counting us kind of speakers and hosts. So Lana, do you already know how many sessions we'll have? So we'll have the
44, 40.
40 people in
Yep,
total.
we'll have 6 rooms with around 7 participants each. And I'm ready to open them up whenever you're ready.
Great. And is there a host or facilitator in each of them? Perfect.
Yep. Awesome.
Dimitri will join as well. Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have 20 minutes for the discussions in the breakout rooms, and we'll be adding all of your comments to a slide as we go along, and then those will be presented as we return kind of at the hour or 5 minutes after. So see you all in a bit. Enjoy your discussions. Are we all back yet? Must be, right? Great.
Yep,
Well,
my group's back.
perfect. Yes, I feel like we were all summoned at the same time with that abrupt stop. Just when we were still hearing from another member of our session that I'd love to connect with separately from the Kakuma Vocational Center. So John, you'll be hearing from me if I find your email. Basically, we're back now to discuss for a few minutes how we what we came up with in terms of solutions, or maybe even more challenges, like in the case of the breakout session that I was a part of, which are very important to highlight, because of course only if we really address those challenges and pinpoint them all can we look to the most adequate solutions. So I will share my screen now and start sharing the breakout room slides that you have prepared essentially during your sessions. And then I'd like for the respective facilitators to just speak up if you recognize your slide. And just really, we have a minute, maybe 2 minutes each to go through, since we only have about 20 minutes left. So 2-3 minutes for each of you to just share what you discussed and any groundbreaking solutions that you may have shared.
Great. So this is our slide. Thank you for the group for all the ideas, and I'll try to speed through it. So, I lost the screen.
Sorry, just loading.
Okay, there we are. So the first point we talked about is in the context of refugee camps. Many times networking is something that is challenging, networking opportunities, networking activities, networking channels. Many times they're isolated to the NGOs that are operating the refugee camps, and there's not a lot of opportunities to network beyond the borders of that camp, and much less in the international context. And then one of the solutions there is that we need more training programs and guidance on how people can kind of like use a platform, create an online profile and be able to access networking opportunities in the digital ecosystem. The second point, which is very interesting,
Can I just pick up on just to kind of also second on that? We've seen that not just within the camps, but also outside the camp, that networks are a huge barrier for refugees getting access to job markets when they're displaced. And we've seen, I think there's an increasing volume now of like these community-based platforms. So Discord, I think in tech is a really popular one that people use. And Banu and I have been exploring Discord with Naya, but there's definitely some cool stuff out there. But I think, this is a really, whoever put this forward, great point on the networking thing. It's a massive barrier.
Agreed. The second point is how do we make, especially in the humans in the loop pipeline of data annotation and microwork, how do we make it more transparent? There's that tug of war between how to affect structural change, but also allowing market dynamics to continue growing. There are no solutions there that we believe solve the problem, obviously, but can we design fair work policies that are moderated by international groups? Can there be more of a bottoms up approach where we certify companies that do have transparent and sustainable and impactful pipelines of digital work? So that's a solution that was brought to the table. The third point that we talked is digital literacy, right? How do we, and I'll put actually these 2 points together, but how do we continue training these communities, not only on the technical skills, but also on the soft skills, right? How to be productive, how to use that basic communication, engagement in workplaces. How do we incentivize these communities to take or to consume the massive amounts of free content that there is online, when many times they're not incentivized because there's no light at the end of the tunnel with a tangible job opportunity. So how do we do that switch? And then last but not least, just banking challenges, payment platforms. How do we make it more universal and accessible? Next.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Wow, I'm really impressed with how many very, very concrete solutions you all defined there. I wish we could just delve more deeply into all of them. Feel free to add any additional questions for this room in the chat, because we do want to have some time in the end to kind of, open up the conversation a bit and add any remarks or questions. Let's move on to the next one. Breakout room number 2, if you recognize your slide.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. That's me. So we have had a lot of great ideas shared by everyone. Sonia from Nomads shared that it would be great if we can provide mentoring and training opportunities so that the refugees can gain soft and hard skills that they can use once they get remote or in-person job opportunities. Justin from Uganda, and he's also the MIT React alumni, he mentioned that refugee-led organizations should network with government agencies to facilitate the financial payment options to the refugees, and also help with funding the training opportunities. Karim from Skill Lab in Netherlands, he mentioned 3 great points. One is opportunity creators could focus on creating opportunities focused on skills rather than titles. So he mentioned that skills is more important than that's what we should focus on more. And the second idea is that present everyone the same way. So if either they are refugees, migrants, or any other one, we shouldn't entitle them this way. So we should present everyone the same way. And the third one is basically providing alternative methods of administrative payments. We know that a lot of refugees face payment issue problems, like how the companies should pay the refugees. So he mentioned that we can also focus on this more. And Saleh from Yemen, now he's based in Malaysia. He mentioned that the refugees have great skills, but it's been very hard for them to find chances or opportunities. He mentioned that he has a lot of certificates, more than 26 certificates, but it's been so hard for him to get a chance in Malaysia. And he mentioned that a lot of refugees who are doctors, teachers, or anything like that, they have been working in restaurants for the past few years. And we thought that maybe certificate recognition could be an issue, and that's why this is the case with them. And Taufik from Malaysia also mentioned that refugees in Malaysia don't have right to work, and this has been very hard for them. That's why a lot of the organizations thought of providing upskilling opportunities. And he mentioned as well that internship programs and internship opportunities would be really good to be provided for the refugees from different regions or countries. Unfortunately, Alba didn't have time left to talk about her ideas. So maybe, I don't know if we can give her a chance, or you decide, Lily. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Banu. So insightful as well. So many important challenges highlighted as well from firsthand experience, which is always the most valuable, of course. So thank you all for sharing that. Alba, are you here to unmute? And
yes, ma'am, I'm here. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, I say that my family and I moved from Colombia 19 years ago to United States. Both my husband and I are engineers, but we started working here as the Malaysia people in restaurants and everything else until we can work here in our professional camp. So it's very difficult for the refugees to go another country with another language, another culture, and start with their own profession. So I think that is very important to help with the certification and the training that is necessary to work in the jobs that they are training on our countries. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Alba. And I was just recently part of a webinar hosted, I believe, by UNESCO staff that are doing lots of research and kind of thinking on how, also digital credentials can be recognized. I believe, we should really, see the opportunities in the digital economy in these kinds of globally accessible online courses or whatever certifications to really be useful in the global economy, more so maybe than in the local economy where someone is based. This actually segues into the session that I believe is next, which is the one that I was a part of, where we just pointed out, indeed, again, some challenges and some opportunities as well that we see in the global freelance economy, being, just as I said, something that Isabella from NAMAL highlighted, that it really opens up a global economy of online work beyond just the local economy where someone is immediately based in this situation. So that is really something that that we shouldn't lose sight of, and something that we should try and understand. You know, how can where are these credentials and certificates valuable? What employers value them and recognize them, and making sure that there are services and support and networking services that allow people to understand where they can go with those certifications, who will recognize them, and who will value that learning that was achieved. We also had a exchange about, you know, the kind of somewhat misguided definition of using a digital nomad as terminology in this context, given that comes with the privilege of being able to move, of mobility of wherever you want. And I think, we just said that it just does need to be overturned, this trope, in light of also what Hugh said in terms of the trends of not just the unfortunate global refugee crises that are ongoing and have been ongoing, but also the fact that globally, you know, we are a much more digitalized world, a much more digitalized global economy. And those things brought together should just hopefully lead to these digital nomad kind of tropes not being, particularly, let's say, closed off to specific, you know, privileged, wealthy and mobile people, but essentially should mean that everybody has opportunities to the kind of work that what was previously called digital nomads would have access to. I'll go quickly through some of the others that we've highlighted here. some of which include that, as Jim from WUSC highlighted, that certain industries are really very desperate for semi-skilled talent and are looking to hire diversely. So it's really important to just make people aware of the right sectors, or for kind of support organizations or platforms to really just approach the right kinds of sectors. I think that was highlighted in the trends earlier as well. Then I highlighted the part about needing to change the narrative. And something else that Jim highlighted from his experience with WUSC is that there are a lot of skills development offers, but they're often not so consolidated, or not consolidated enough, in the sense that everybody knows where to go for what kind of upskilling or training opportunities. And also that comes with the fact that what you often need is physical learning spaces, access to data, electricity, and devices, which are of course also barriers to accessing these kinds of work opportunities that need to be addressed, which we felt should really be kind of handed over as a challenge to companies out there. I mean, we all know how often private corporations renew their tech kind of infrastructure, and how many office buildings have kind of, will maybe sit partially empty still as more people are still in home office. So why not open those spaces, that tech infrastructure, and the access to the internet up to people that want to make use of it to be able to work in the global gig economy. So a challenge, but also a potential solution here. All right, I think I'll leave it here. We have just a few minutes left, and I'd like to leave some time for breakout rooms 4, 5, and 6. So room number 4, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Lily. This is going to be, yours is a hard act to follow. This is a little bit of a word salad, but some of the things that we talked about, one of the biggest barriers, of course, is this right to work issue. And one thing that would help would be, well, first of all, organizations and businesses having a clear understanding of what these processes and requirements are, and then also having that support for refugees and displaced persons themselves, both to have resources to learn what are the actual steps that they need in order to obtain right to work, in order to be legally authorized to work, either on site or remotely. What are the local requirements? What are the more broader requirements? And then one point that Davianis brought up was some advice on security in a digital world. If you grew up in an environment where you weren't constantly on the internet at all times, it may be kind of a new concept to learn how to protect yourself and protect your identity online. And this also goes towards protecting the intellectual property and that goes with the company as well. So protecting the data and the infrastructure of the organization that you're working for. We talked a little bit about accessible, short programs and boot camps that can enhance the skills of displaced people to learn both technical skills and also learn soft skills, professional development skills. Some of these include English language, of course, or the language of whichever, whatever required in the business that you're hoping to work for. And then also mentorship programs. So, composing and planning one's own career trajectory is difficult for anyone, but especially if, as some have mentioned in previous breakout rooms, mentioned that if you're feeling isolated or you're feeling as though you may not have had examples of how to rise up the career ladder or the academic ladder, these types of mentorship programs are really important. Freelance and gig options were offered as kind of a solution to some of these challenges, but it was mentioned that these do not always have the stability that folks with families or other sorts of financial responsibilities are looking for, and so it can often add more pressure to what's already a kind of stressful situation. And then we talked a lot about, this is something that I personally, working for MIT React, think a lot about, which is, on a very high detail level, what are the solutions for providing technical infrastructure? because even if you're able to secure laptops for folks, there's often situations where folks do not have access to internet, electricity at times. There are blackouts. There are times when someone may need to be unexpectedly offline. And so I'm not sure who all was at a session last week with Nadia from SNHU, but we talked a little bit about, engaging in conversations between the employer and the employee about what is the contingency plan? How can we show some, humanity and respect to one another when it comes to, for example, I expect that I may lose internet connection when there is a election in my country, or I tend to lose, there may be a blackout when there's a storm, a rainstorm in my region, and having a conversation with the employer. Okay, this is what I'm going to do if and when that happens. And so just having this, humanity and respect for one another. And then Rita brought up a really good point, which is about setting up temporary working stations. And so Rita, if you want to comment on that, happy to give you the space to do that. Or if you don't want to, that's okay.
I think looking at the time, we might have to move on to the 2 rooms that we have left in any case. But thank you so much, Jillian, for highlighting all of these important matters. I mean, I personally, from our conversation, would again look to actually the private sector, to kind of carry some of that also financial responsibility of making sure that and that's also in their own interest, right? I mean, connecting people, making sure the most people possible are using their data, their network, whatever. And something that we trialed with Kiron during the COVID times, where many of our blended learning programs had to move to fully online delivery, was really to work with, telecommunication companies to make sure that our platform is accessible free of charge, so it doesn't cost any data when students access it, for example. And those kinds of case-by-case negotiations that should just happen kind of more naturally, maybe also from the initiative of corporations, in my opinion, just to create more equal access to hardware and data, as you were saying. All right, we will move on to breakout room number 5.
Hi, that's me. Thank you, everyone. And perhaps very similar to what everyone says, and I definitely want to, follow on from what Gillian says. At NAML and working with MIT, we always think about how do we ensure that refugees have what they need, and in terms of infrastructure, even in Lebanon, people who are not refugees have problems with blackouts. In our previous session before this, Hiba, who was one of our moderators, her internet disappeared, so she fell out of the call. So so employers really need to think and understand the challenges that they encounter when hiring refugees. I guess one thing which no one else brought up is collaboration between organizations. No one else specifically brought that up. How can we? And this is one thing one of our refugee participants said. It seems like organizations are all operating, operating in silos and not with consistent messaging or consistency. How can we find a way for everyone to collaborate in this space and not compete? And I think this is very important for us to, for us as we sort of close the session, because collaboration is one thing that we're not good at doing, but one thing which we need to be better at doing. So I'll just end it there. Everyone else said similar things to what we described.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Really, really great input there, and also leaves us on a great note to indeed think about how we can collaborate with some of the people that we spoke with today or met. I'll be sure to check out how we might be able to connect some of us here today with you, or as the organizing team. But also want to give a minute to Dimitri, I believe, to run us through what Breakout Room 6 discussed.
Oh, that was actually me. Lily. But yeah, most of it
Hugh,
was.
sorry about that.
I'm also the world's worst multitasker, so I didn't type and talk well in the session. So you can see there's some missing stuff. But most of it's been covered: financial inclusion, cross-border, cross-sector collaboration. A better way. One interesting point that hasn't been covered is onboarding and creating skill profiles, but like skill passports, which I know has been tried in the EU. But skill passports to enable refugees to be more intelligently matched with career development pathways when they arrive in different companies, I thought was quite interesting as well.
Really interesting. And who did you feel your group felt like that was, in terms of whose responsibility did your group feel that was?
I think it came into collaboration again. I think it would need to be. I mean, businesses would need to buy into a skill passport framework, which I think has been the problem with what's been tried before. But you'd need governments to be involved in kind of rolling that out in the asylum process. So that would have to be a cross collaboration.
Absolutely. So we need to look at who we have in our stakeholder network, maybe also among public institutions and businesses that we could have conversations with about those things and about all the other things we discussed. I mean, really so many ideas. We didn't have all that much time now for a Q&A, but I'm sure there are ways for all of us to connect and for me at least to keep track of who all was here and maybe reach out to you for potential follow-up conversation. Because I definitely feel like the session was inspired by the fact that a lot of us are wondering and trying to see what difference we can make specifically in this field. And that's how we came together, the three organizations that led the session. But just from the conversations with you, we can see that there are so many more ideas and so much work being done that we really need to connect upon, because it's all about complementing each other and not working in silos, as is such a cliche to say, but if beneficiaries, if people that we're hoping to reach and support still feel like we're not doing a good job at connecting and complementing each other's offers, then we really need to take that seriously and do the work of networking. And I'll be sure to reach out to some of you and see how we can connect. I would like to just really express my tremendous gratitude to Hugh and Banu and Enrique for joining the session that they weren't even a part of initially conceptualizing, but have really contributed so incredibly much information and input to. Your firsthand experience has been so valuable to learn from. And I would equally like to thank, of course, the organizers for bringing us all together, for having this month-long summit, and to everyone that joined and chimed into the conversation and shared their solutions. I'll try and think of a way of consolidating all of this. We have it all written down already, so we need to take it somewhere from here. And I look forward to being in touch with all of you, hopefully in another setting soon. All the best, stay healthy. And
thank you, everyone. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone for being part of the session. As organizers, we've been really thrilled to have you here, Lily. Thank you for bringing everyone together. And to everyone else, we have many more sessions coming up. We have a session on labor mobility next week. We have a session on the right of work. How can we create fair and decent work? So look at our schedule. We have many more events coming up. Thank you, Lily. And I think a great way to end is to say, we need more collaboration in this space. This is the one thing that we can do. We are much stronger together than we are apart. So let's all find a way to work together, because a problem shared is a problem solved. Is that the thing? I think that's right. So thank you, everyone. Have a really good day. Ramadan Kareem for everyone celebrating, and happy belated Easter. See you all soon. We're here tomorrow again.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.